I had a wonderful time interviewing Jacqueline. She has the podcast called the Instinctive Australian Shepherd, and we had a wonderful time discussing a little bit about what makes the Australian Shepherd a unique breed and how to determine whether or not they're one that would fit well in your home. I hope you all enjoy learning a little bit more about this wonderful breed, and if you have any questions, you can sure give me a call, shoot me an email, or you can sure contact her. Her website is the instinctiveaussie.com, and she has that podcast if you want to learn a little bit more about the breed. I hope you all enjoy. So, how long have you had Aussies?
I've had Australian Shepherds since I was 14, so that was a while ago.
Okay.
30 years ago, I met my current mentor from a 4-H class. So my brother and I put on a 4-H class, and the whole community was invited. And she showed up with these I just kind of thought they were ugly dogs when I first met them. I really didn't know anything. I'd never seen one before, and I was like, those are weird looking dogs. But then she was super nice and lived on a ranch and invited me out, and that got me all interested in dogs and herding dogs. And mostly that's what I do with my dogs right now. They're working Aussies.
So do you have like a hobby farm or
I have a small ranch. Yeah, I have a small ranch, and my dogs primarily do chores, and they work at least twice a day. That's the biggest value they have for me. But I also trial a lot. You can see some of the spoils of the battle back there. So I do a lot of trialing, and I train other people and their dogs too.
Okay. How far do you usually have to travel for a trial?
Fortunately, I live in Texas, and we have a bunch of trials here.
Okay.
So I don't have to travel a lot, but I have, traveled all across the country just to kind of experience different, just to experience different things and people and all that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How much maintenance does an Aussie require as far as like grooming and that kind of thing?
I think it kind of depends on how particular you are about things. My dogs are working dogs, so they're out in the mud and other various things. And so, I just bathe them or they jump in the tank to clean off. It just really depends on, and also the bloodlines too. So I have a female who has very, minimal coat. It's probably about this long, and it's very smooth. There's no undercoat, and things just kind of brush off of her. Most of my other dogs have that thick, full collar, thick hair, and they require, about once a week just to keep the burrs out, and the undercoat will get matted in various areas if you don't manage it on a regular basis. There's a lot of hair, but I kind of think that that's not. People will complain about the hair. You see them all over Facebook complain about, Aussies have so much hair. I kind of think any dog with a double coat is going to have the same amount of hair. I don't think they have any more than any other breed, like a golden retriever or something, So it kind of depends on the line of how much maintenance their coat requires. And I don't take mine to a groomer. I do it myself. So and really all you need is like a brush of some sort, and then you can get those dematting brushes that are longer and kind of. Mine dogs don't really like them because I think they kind of pull on the dog's hair and they don't really like them.
Okay.
But
do they struggle at all with the heat down in Texas?
Well, I have a couple that are a little bit more sensitive to it than others. I have, I have 7 working dogs right now, and they come from different lines. So some of them, my main dog Copper, he really kind of struggles with it for a few weeks until we get conditioned, but conditioning is part of it. So if you get them outside enough and get them used to the heat and kind of keep your temperatures down or higher in the house or wherever they're kept, it helps them a lot. The conditioning is really important. But I have other dogs that don't even seem to notice it. So it's kind of an individual thing too, I think, in that area.
Okay. Are there any health conditions that somebody looking into getting an Aussie should be aware of or be asking their breeder about before bringing one home?
This is a really good question to ask. And I think it's a really good topic. Finding the right breeder is, for any breed of dog, is super important. Finding that breeder that actually does stuff with their dog, they compete with their dog, they work their dog, they do something with their dogs other than just breed them every time they come in heat, is an indicator that that's more of a high quality breeder in my mind usually. A breeder that can talk about the pedigrees and the dogs and the pedigrees. I have stories for almost every dog in all my dogs' pedigrees, because that's how nerdy some of us get about our dogs, and we want to know the stories and where they're coming from. But as far as healthy things go, yes, there are the genetic tests that you can do, something like paw prints. That's something I prefer, just because they're super user friendly. Sorry, my dogs are making so much noise in the background. Apparently they all decided to bark and sneeze all at the same time. So paw prints is the one I use because they're super, they're a little bit more expensive, but they give out coupons if you sign up for their stuff. But I think there's close to 20 some tests that you can get for Aussies, and they have a panel. You just go down to your breed, you click the panel, and then they have all these tests that you can do. We have DM, which causes, in older age, it kind of causes them to become weak in their back end. It's not a painful disease, but it causes them to have very accelerated weakness and struggle with their back end, like their rears get falling down or they become weak. That's kind of a big one, and a lot of us watch that very carefully. MDR1, which is something that can be in any breed of dog, and that is a sensitivity to drugs, certain drugs like Ivermectin and things like that. Now, most of the time, the amount of Ivermectin that's in like heartworm is not enough to hurt even an MDR1 affected dog usually, but then it helps you stay away from certain drugs. Epilepsy is a big problem. I kind of think this is kind of all breed wise getting to be a big problem, and I'm not exactly sure why, but epilepsy is growing, and there's really no test for it right now. They haven't identified the gene that goes along with epilepsy in dogs. So you kind of go back to trusting the breeders, asking questions, have you had epilepsy in these dogs, and hoping that people will tell you truthfully and honestly what the actual issues are in their breed. And that's another thing to look for in a breeder, is someone that's honest about what's going on in their lines, and hey, we had this here and we're taking it out here. Because I personally think that epilepsy is one of the most devastating diseases, because watching a dog have a seizure and you can't do anything about it is extremely painful and suffering to the person as well as the dog. Let's see, I didn't cover every disease, of course, but those are kind of the
main ones.
The main ones, then you have some eye ones. And so typically on most of when you get your results back, typically if it's a carrier, it's not usually affected, which means that if it's a carrier, it's probably not going to, show up later on in life. Some things it can, but if it's affected, which means it has 2 copies of the gene, then you're more, and it's still not a guarantee it's going to show up.
Right.
It just means it's a higher risk for it to show up.
Right.
So, and mostly responsible breeders don't ever breed 2 copies of a genetic issue.
Right.
It's not a big deal to have 1 copy because it's really not high risk. But so I personally don't mind having 1 or 2 things. I prefer them to be clear because it gives you more genetic diversity. You can breed to different situations if you need to keep something back, and some people, you don't want them to throw. With I have dogs that have instinct and they work. So we have to balance the throwing the baby out with bathwater kind of thing, what we're looking for. But does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. How hard are they to train? Like to house train and to teach to do the work that you use them for?
I think they're really easy to train. It's one of the things that attracted me. I think they're probably close to a border collie level of being able to train fast. And potty training, most of my dogs potty train within a couple of days. And then they're trustworthy after a few months. You can't ever trust them. It's not fair to any little baby puppy to expect them to be fully potty trained, before a couple of months that you've had them. But within a week or so or less, most of mine are going on schedule, and they'll only make a mess if you let them. Your fault, basically, if you don't get them out in time. They're really easy to learn tricks, and I think they're really easy dogs to train.
At what point do you start working them with the livestock? At what age do you start that kind of training?
Training starts around a year because you need to wait, just like with agility and a lot of other sports, you need to wait for all the bones to finish growing and all the growth
Yep.
plates to stop. And so you don't want any damage because it's a very athletic and, activity, and they have to be moving a lot. And when also they have to have their mind ready to take the pressure of training, because all trainings are some sort of pressure, at least what we do. They have to be able to take correction, take directions, and actually be ready and mature enough to train. So usually around a year, I'll take them and test them. It's mostly for my curiosity than actually dog training to see if they're interested in stock a couple times before during that first year to see if they have any interest in it. Mhm.
Do you usually start them out on like ducks or sheep or whatever?
Sheep or goats. Ducks are actually, contrary to what you think, most people think they're easy. They're actually the hardest livestock to work because the dog has to be super precise and listen and make small movements. And when they're young, they're usually running a lot. And ducks are very hard. I don't usually ever put a dog on ducks until they're pretty advanced. So
Okay.
it's usually sheep or goats and real tame dog broke sheep, which means they don't run around. They kind of just stick around by me, and then it keeps everything calm.
Okay. How much time would somebody looking at getting an Aussie should they expect to spend with like training and exercise to keep them happy?
So I'm glad you asked this question because it's a real big myth out there. You see in all these groups, people are like, oh, you have to exercise them like 10 hours a day and they have to be constantly stimulated. And I think that's a false impression of any dog, because if you constantly stimulate and constantly exercise, you're keeping them in that higher adrenaline state and you're actually causing more of a neurotic dog. The exercise needs to be mental and physical, and it doesn't always have to be long periods of time. You want to keep that dog in a low adrenaline state, get them tired, long walks if you can. I mean, they'll go with you all day if you let them. I mean, if you want to exercise and run trail rides they'll go all day till they drop usually, but you don't really want to do that. And I don't think it's completely necessary. I think in that whole mental stimulation, like doing an activity I do with my young dogs before they are old enough to be on stock, I'll train them, will be, tricks and obedience type stuff. And I'll do tracking, teach them how to find things, and doing nose work. Those are really good activities that stimulate the dog and wear them out. But you also need to teach them to be calm. So there's an activity, they call it sit on the dog, which basically is the dog sitting or laying down next to your chair and you sit on the leash. And then the dog just has to learn to stay there and be calm and be next to you for however long. You start out small and you try and get, small increments of time, and then you get bigger and bigger. Because you just don't want to get to that point where you're creating a dog, you're creating a monster if you keep exercising with no purpose and no intention other than just to keep them moving, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But mine don't. I'll have 6 or 7 dogs and I'll just be laying around the house. When we're in the house, they're all chill. We go outside, they're ready to go. So, I mean, there's no real number, but it's not constant. It doesn't have to be constant. I think you have to balance the exercise with the teaching them to learn to be calm, because they're very happy laying on the couch just as well as they are running outside too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You said you have a number of them. Do they generally get along with other dogs if they're introduced to an adult dog, or is it better if you introduce them to another puppy or bring them in as young dogs?
Yeah, so Aussies are breedists. They prefer Aussies. If you take them out somewhere and there's another Aussie, that's where they're going to go. They prefer their own breed. It's kind of funny, and people always notice it when they have multiple dogs. I think if you're talking about introducing them like in a park or a different setting where there's different dogs that other people have, you need to teach the dogs to just ignore those dogs, because when you allow your dog to run up on other dogs, you're just waiting for a problem to come along. I teach mine to leave the other dogs alone, and if the other person and the other dog, they want to make a sniff or talk to each other, you have to get permission, and the dog has to approach when you tell them, and that kind of thing. And I think that most dogs raised properly and raised in that where they have some boundaries and structure, they behave that way. As far as introducing them into the house, I prefer, or into a new pack, like say you get a new puppy or a new dog coming to the house, it's easier with puppies. Aussies are really good with babies, and they're really good with younger dogs. And I think probably many breeds are like this, but the puppies be easiest. if you're not, and I usually try to keep a balance of males and females. And if I had just two dogs, it would be one male and one female. They
Mhm.
don't fight usually, typically, unless they're litter mates. Litter mates will fight. Doesn't matter if they have that personality and you allow them to act that way.
Yep.
Their brother or sister. And I encourage people not to get two dogs at the same time.
Yep, definitely not a good option.
Train it up, teach it some manners, and then when you get your next one, maybe a year or two later, the dog you have can then be a leader and help you train the young dog. But getting two at the same time, like I said, litter mates will oftentimes fight at a younger age and be more vicious than non-litter mates. And then, the female thing, females have trouble. I think if they have that personality, they're going to cause that problem. They have more of a trouble letting things go than boy dogs do. But not all of them fight. I mean, some of those temperaments are it depends on the line, it depends on the dog, so you'll have some success no matter what you do. But those general rules for how I do it, because it seems to have worked better over the years. So.
Do you think that an Aussie would be a good first dog for somebody who has never owned a dog before?
If I think they're great dogs for anybody. However, Aussies are smart and easy to get along, and most Aussies people fall in love with, other than the cute little adorable puppies, are those dogs that are 3, 4, 5 years old who have learned how things go. They're well trained. They're smart. They're easy dogs to get along with. Those are the Aussies people fall in love with. Well, it takes a path to get there. There's this popular meme out there where it shows this cute little fuzzy Aussie, because there's really not a puppy, I don't think, that's cuter than Aussies, because they're just so adorable. And then it shows a picture of a Velociraptor.
Yep.
And then it shows a full-grown Aussie dog. Many people have seen that. And that is the truest meme I've ever known about dogs before. That age after like 6 months old, they have a personality, and some of them, not all of them, again, some breeders are breeding for more calm, easygoing dogs. But those of us that have the high drive original Aussies, there's that period from about 6 months to 2 to 3 years old, depending on the personality of the dog, where they're difficult. They're not bad, they're just pushy, and they need boundaries, and they need constant kind of like, hey, remember you're the dog, that kind of thing,
Yep.
And that, so if you're a first time dog owner, can understand and treat them like a dog with respect, but they are dogs, which is hard because they're really smart and they kind of act like people sometimes because they just so observant and they really get in your head, but they're still a dog. If you can treat them that way kindly teach the boundaries and say, hey, these are the rules, and constantly kind of be reinforcing them, on the other side, you can't get a better dog, in that, I think. So if you're a person that can handle that kind of structure and you understand that this is going to be a road, then beginner could handle them. But if you're kind of like, I just want a puppy or a dog to love me, then probably would be a difficult situation. You might have one that's got some problems.
Okay.
But,
how do they handle strangers, like people that they don't know coming over or seeing them in public?
So there's a big variety in breeders. This is not a very old breed. This breed's only been around or registered for, I think it's 65 years or so right now. So it's not a old breed. Back in the day, they were valued for their protective abilities. People would take them to the rodeo, to the ranch, and then they would guard the saddles and the gear while the person was out competing at the rodeo. That's where they really grew up in popularity. A lot of old timers who've had Aussies for a long time will say they got their first Aussie at a rodeo. So there was one of the more popular people, Jay Sizzler. He used to train Aussies back in the 30s and stuff and do tricks, and he was on TV and all that. He would say, here's the trick. He'd put a $100 bill in the back of the pickup truck and put the Aussie in the back of the pickup truck. And they always said, if you can get the $100 bill, it's yours. Nobody ever got the $100 bill because the Aussies are very protective. But they were valued for that back then. So now we've got some people who are breeding Aussies that are more super cool, chill, golden retriever style personality where they've never met a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but the original lines, and typically more the working lines, you'll have a protective dog. My dogs will scare you to death if you come near my truck or my house. But if I take them out of the truck, they'll be like, hey, you're my best friend. But they're very protective of their property. And that's normal. So you have to just kind of evaluate the personality of that dog. Take them out a lot when they're young. Get them out. I don't like the word socialize because it's not really just la-di-da-di-da. Train them with people. Take them to the pet stores. Let them meet people. That will help a lot. And then, but when they're about 9 or 10 months old, they'll start 15 months old, that kind of teenagery age, they will oftentimes start back and people will say, oh, my dog's never barked at anybody. Well, they're going through a developmental phase right now. You need to keep training on them and keep getting them to do that, to learn to be like, okay, people are fine. You're only allowed to be protective in these situations. So
Yep.
That's pretty typical.
And then you mentioned that you do the stock work with your dogs. Do you do any other kind of competitions with them?
I've done a little bit of rally and I've done tracking. I really enjoy tracking. I like the sports where the dog is I can't sniff and tell where he is. He's in charge of the situation. In stock, it's like I can't run around chase the cow like he does. So
yep.
I like those kind of competitions.
What is your favorite thing about Aussies? What do you love most about the breed?
The partnership. They love to team up with people, and that look they give you, like they adore you, and just they can almost read your mind because they're so observant and they're so in tune to people. Like their whole reason for existing is to make you happy. So I just love that about it. And the loyalty, and they don't run away. They're just super loyal, and they're just really, I guess that's what I love the most about them.
Okay. What do you think is the most frustrating thing about the breed?
So they have a mind of their own, and so they love you and everything, but I train my dogs to be super independent. So my dogs may have to gather cattle out of sight where I can't see them. They have to make their own decisions. So I let them think a lot. And then sometimes when they get older, they think they know the rules themselves and they want to be independent. They kind of do their own thing. That can be frustrating, the pushiness of them, because they have oftentimes a very big personality. I think they're a type A personality dog.
Okay.
I'm a type A person. That's why we get along. So they can be real pushy. I think that is the most frustrating part.
Okay. And then is there anything else that you think people should know about before getting an Aussie or before thinking that it might be a good breed for them?
I kind of talked about some of the drawbacks of their personalities. I think those are the things that I talked about before, just making sure you get a good breeder and understanding the time commitment of any puppy, and that these guys do have energy. They do require you to pay attention to them and watch them and manage them for a good 1.5 to 3 years. It's not going to be a 6 months, 9 months, oh, you're an adult and everything's cool. That's not who they are typically. So I think that's what they should be watching for.
And then how would somebody go about finding a good breeder?
That's a good question too. So if you're looking for a working dog that works stock, there's a website, I own it, I'll say that, but it's really the only one out there. That's workingaussiesource.com. And we have vetted working breeders. And you can get working Aussies to be a good pet or to be a good like a sport dog if you're going to do agility or tracking or nose work or whatever. I would recommend going to a working breeder because those are the style of dogs I like. But I would go, if you can't find any of those, ASCA, the Australian Shepherd Club of America, ASCA.org is the original parent club. I think they have breeder referrals there. Go to a dog show. Like if you're thinking, hey, I wanna show dog, conformation dog, that's totally different than a working dog. Or I want an obedience dog, go to one of those shows, a dog show, watch the dogs and see the ones you really like. Interact with the ones you like, call different breeders that are actually doing things with their dogs. Talk to the breeders of the ones doing what you want them to do. And then, if you say, hey, I just want a pet, a lot of us breed dogs and not every puppy in the litter is going to be a competition dog. Many of them go on to pet homes and they make great dogs. So, and then ask them questions about the pedigree. If they can't tell you about the dogs in the first 5 generations of pedigree, they don't know much about what they're breeding. Those are some tips. So.
Awesome. I've even learned stuff. I grew up with an Aussie, and so I know a little bit about the breed just from him, but it's been fun to hear the working side because he was a show dog.
Yeah.
So we did confirmation with him. He didn't ever work anything.
That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Everybody wants different things, and it's a breed that can give you all those things.
Yeah. He
Um,
was definitely a fun dog.
yeah, they're fun dogs. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Was there anything that I didn't cover that you think people should know about the breed?
Well, if I can plug my podcast, that would
Oh
be,
yeah, for
there's
sure.
a lot of information. It's called the Instinctive Australian Shepherd, and you can find it anywhere you can get a podcast. And it talks about the history of the breed, and we talk a lot of working stuff, herding, stock dog stuff, but we also do some other things for pet owners and talk about behaviors and stuff like that. So
Awesome.
yeah, that would be cool.
Definitely. I will put a link to that in the bottom of this interview.
Oh, cool. Well, I
So
hope it
that
was
people can
helpful.
find you.
Yeah, cool.
Is there any other way that people could reach out to you if they had questions or were wanting? You said you breed, correct?
Not very often.
Not very
Every now
often.
and then I do. I'm not a big breeder.
Okay.
But I have a website called stockdogtrainer.com. So
Okay.
that's kind of how you reach me personally if you're interested in herding stuff or whatever. So
Okay. I'll include that in case it's something that people want to know more information about.
cool. Well, good luck with your project. And
Yeah, thank you very much. I sure appreciate your time and your knowledge and being willing to share it with me so it can help people get breeds that fit their lifestyles.
their lifestyle. Yes, that's great. And it's a good project. So you're very welcome. And thanks for inviting me.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye bye.